Chapter 1. Slavery and the Groan. Beneath the burden of golden cities, Egypt sang to its golden cities, but this song was permeated with bitter smoke and salty sweat. The sons of Israel groaned beneath this song, like a subterranean river of sorrow flowing beneath the foundations of the magnificent pyramids and treasuries. The sun blazed over the sands of Goshen, scorching their already dry skin. The land that once received them as honored guests and brothers during this famine had now turned into a merciless yoke. The entire life of the people of the covenant was reduced to a few unchanging elements: brick and clay, sweat and blood. Brick was their prayer, clay, their tombstone, sweat, the only liquid connecting them to the earth, and blood, the sole justification for their existence. The days passed, compressed like blocks of clay, each one a witness to broken will and extinguished hope. For centuries, this people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, lost their identity, dissolving into the continuous, monotonous horror of construction. Their faith, once a bright fire, now merely flickered like an ember covered in the ash of despair. They no longer knew how to pray. Their voices were so raw from the overseer's shouts that all they could do was groan. A deep, primal, wordless groan that rose from the very depths of their soul, penetrating the Egyptian sky through the cracks in the stone walls. This groan was the only sincere prayer they could still offer. Meanwhile, in the marble halls, where the air was infused with the scent of lotus and myrrh, sat the Pharaoh. Young, majestic, self-satisfied, he did not know Joseph. Time, that eternal destroyer of memory, had erased from his mind the story of the Hebrew viceroy who saved Egypt from famine. For him, the past did not exist. Only the eternal, divine present of his own reign mattered. His heart hardened not from age or war, but from excessive, unnatural power. His eyes saw only a shadow hovering at the edge of his greatness, the shadow of fear. The people are multiplying, and they might become a threat to us. This thought was not just a political calculation for the Pharaoh, but a metaphysical concern. How dare slaves, formed from mud, multiply if their only purpose is to serve and die? Their fruitfulness was a challenge to his divine control over life and death. It was a biological betrayal, an insurrection against the world order he had established. The Pharaoh's fear was cold and rational, like a knife's edge. He feared not the strength of their arms, but the strength of their life. His magnificent, self-proclaimed world, where he was a solar deity, was now overshadowed by the nameless slaves whose uncontrolled vitality threatened to engulf his golden throne. And so, this divine ruler issued a decree meant to stop the very river of life flowing in the veins of the Hebrews, to sever the male lineage, to destroy the future, to turn the people into a barren tree, to drown the newborn sons in the waters of the Nile. The river he considered his property, his divine brother. Every day, every brick, every groan, every cry of a mother hiding her son, all this was his conscious work, his tool to turn millions of people into a faceless, submissive, dead backdrop for his eternal glory. But he did not know that every groan rising from the clay pits was recorded in heaven. He did not know that his fear was the first, unconscious acknowledgement that a power existed higher than his scepter and his crown. This power was preparing to emerge from the desert. Chapter 2. The Cry and the Calling, the Fire that Does Not Consume. In the darkness of slavery, the people sighed toward heaven. But this sigh had now become not just a complaint, but an explosion of metaphysical pain. It was a collective 400-year-old cry that finally tore through the veil of indifference and reached the throne of the Almighty. And God heard. At this time, Moses, a man who had fled, hidden from his past and forgotten his future, was tending the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro in the desolation of Midian. For 40 years, the desert had cleansed him, burning away the remnants of Egyptian gold and palace vanity, transforming the prince into a shepherd and the warrior into a silent observer. And now, on the edge of the wilderness, near Mount Horeb, where the stones were dry and the air tense with silence, Moses saw it. It was a vision that violated all laws of nature and matter. A bush was burning, but not consumed. Fire, the essence of destruction and absorption, became the essence of presence and creation. This fire did not devour, it illuminated. It was a flame that evoked not a desire to flee, but an irresistible need to approach. It was a sign that what was about to happen could not be explained by human logic or Egyptian science. When Moses drew near, he heard the voice. It was neither the whisper of the wind nor the roar of thunder. It was a pure, powerful, yet intimate sound, emanating not from a natural element, but from the very center of his being. The soul-awakening voice that plucked him from Midianite tranquility and threw him back into the crucible of history. I am Yahweh. Go, deliver my people. The voice did not request, but proclaimed. It did not ask if Moses wanted to, but told him that he must. Moses, once a prince, now felt like an ignorant and fearful man. Who am I, Lord? I cannot speak. I am a fugitive. I am a murderer. He sought justification in his hesitation, his stuttering, his abandonment. But the voice was overwhelming. It revealed to him the greatest secret of existence. I am that I am, Yahweh. He was not the God of the Nile, or the sun god, or the God of thunder. He was being, pure existence, the unchanging force that stood outside time and outside Pharaoh. It was a name that demanded not worship, but action. Meanwhile, deep within Pharaoh's palace, between columns taller than any man, another voice echoed, the whisper of pride. Pharaoh, having just returned from a ceremony where he was celebrated as the son of Ra, was confident in his own divinity. He was the God of this world, and thus nothing higher existed that could disrupt his will. When Moses and his brother Aaron stood before him, their words about some unknown Lord, Yahweh, living somewhere in the desert, sounded like insolence. How could some nomadic phantom god demand the release of slaves who were his property, his living stone? Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? This phrase became not just a question, but a manifesto of human arrogance. It was a philosophical denial of God, proclaimed against the backdrop of absolute power. It was a clash of two wills, the will of the one who is, Yahweh, and the will of the one who wishes to appear to be, Pharaoh. From that moment on, their meeting turned into a cosmic duel. Pharaoh, instead of releasing the people, doubled their burden. He challenged not Moses, but the very principle of being. And Moses, though afraid and uncertain, stood before him, supported only by the power of the word he had heard from the fire that did not consume. He was a grain of sand before a mountain, but within that grain resided the might of heaven, and Pharaoh was soon to feel it upon his beautiful, golden, but doomed country. Chapter 3. The Plague and the Resistance. the battle for the heart. The clash began. It was not between armies, but between two realities, between two laws, the law of Egypt and the law of God. Moses stood before Pharaoh, not as a slave, but as a thundering prophet, a herald of God, whose voice cracked the marble halls. With every "let my people go," the palace grew colder, and the Pharaoh's heart grew more stone-like. It was his active, conscious decision, the refusal to repent. And then the plagues began. Not random disasters, but targeted, precise strikes against the very foundation of Egyptian civilization, its beliefs, and its grandeur. The first strike was against the Nile, the life-giving water, the deity, the source of existence, turned into blood. The Nile, considered the vein of Egypt, transformed into a deadly artery. The stench of rotting fish and despair filled the air. It was the first, physical, painful humiliation of the Pharaoh. His gods were powerless. Egypt groaned. Frogs, flies, darkness, disease. The golden temples, where Ra was worshipped, were covered in filth and impurity. The world's largest irrigation system, the pride of Egypt, collapsed under the invasion of frogs. Beautiful, refined cities turned into biological disaster zones. Each plague was not just physical suffering, but a profound psychological humiliation. Pharaoh's wise men, who initially tried to imitate Moses' wonders, soon backed off, acknowledging, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh, dressed in glittering royal robes, denied the obvious. His pride, like poison, permeated his will, making him absolutely deaf to the suffering of his own people. But the most terrifying was not this. The most terrifying was how darkness descended upon the land. It was not merely the absence of light, it was a thick, tactile, oppressive, inescapable darkness that lasted for 3 days and paralyzed the very movement of life. People in Egypt could not see each other, could not move. They were confined in their houses, as if in stone coffins. During this time, light prevailed in the Hebrew dwellings. It was a visible, undeniable separation, the light of God and the darkness of Egypt. And when Pharaoh's heart finally turned to stone, Moses delivered the last, most dreadful prophecy. "Otherwise, the firstborn of every house shall die." This threat was not against property, but against the very essence of procreation, against posterity. It was a strike aimed at the Holy of Holies, the firstborn, who was considered the heir, the symbol of strength, hope, and the future. It was payment for the firstborn of Israel, whom the Nile had once drowned at his command. It was justice, written by the hand of the highest judge. When night fell upon the land, the silence was deeper than death. In Egypt, where music and noise always reigned, a heavy silence prevailed, so profound that one could hear hearts beating. Every father, every son lay still, holding their breath, awaiting the fulfillment of the prophecy. Meanwhile, behind the walls, in the Hebrew quarters, a secret, sacred ritual was taking place that would decide their fate. Chapter 4. Blood and the Exodus. In the wake of the angel of death, the night of the Passover, it was a night filled with both mystical terror and absolute hope. The blood of the Lamb, applied to the doorposts, was not just a sign, but a demarcation line between life and death, between slavery and freedom, between the law of Egypt and the law of the covenant. Inside the Hebrew homes, unleavened bread was eaten in haste, the bread of affliction, reminding them of the impossibility of delaying even for a moment. Hearts beat between paralyzing fear and triumphant hope, for they knew, tonight, everything is decided. and then came the breath of the angel of death. It passed through the entire country, like an invisible storm, but did not touch the doors marked with blood. And then a cry rang out. Not one, but a million cries of grief that rose from every Egyptian home, from the slave's hut to the Pharaoh's palace. Death took the firstborn from every family, from the Pharaoh's son, who was to inherit the empire, to the firstborn of the livestock. While Egyptian mothers tore their hair, feeling the irreparable loss, Israel received the command, "Go out." Pharaoh, broken, humiliated, and frantic with grief, begged them to leave himself. His pride, his divine majesty, crumbled to dust before the corpse of his own son. Israel set out. It was not a march, but a chaotic, hasty, uncontrollable exodus. 600,000 men, not counting, women, children, and a great multitude of mixed peoples who joined them, left Egypt, taking not only their belongings, but also the gold and silver that the Egyptians, in their terror, gave them. This was payment for 400 years of slavery, executed in a single night. But the Pharaoh's peace was short-lived. As soon as the first surge of grief subsided, his stony heart hardened again. But now it was not the stillness of pride, but furious, mad, irrational anger. His empire was plundered, his gods humiliated, his firstborn taken. Pharaoh regretted it. His chariots thundered after them, 600 chosen chariots, the entire force of the Egyptian military machine. The sand rose like a red storm, horses pranced, and the sound of approaching metal, the clash of weapons, was itself a harbinger of death. The Israelites, who were walking in the light of God's cloud that protected them by day and illuminated them by night, found themselves trapped. Before them stretched the boundless sea, a red, insurmountable wall of water that absorbed the sky. Behind them, the sword of Egypt, thirsty for blood. This was a moment of complete, absolute despair, when the newly freed people roared again, but not from pain, but from fear, accusing Moses. "Were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to die in the wilderness?" It was the last test of their faith, the final lesson of slavery. Chapter 5. The miracle and the praise, mirrors of God and the triumph. In the moment of greatest despair, when the cries of the Egyptian riders mingled with the roar of the waves, Moses addressed not the people, but heaven. And then the incomprehensible command was given, "Tell the sons of Israel to go forward, to go into the sea, before which the earth itself trembled." But Moses, remembering the fire that did not consume, and the voice that defeated the Pharaoh, raised his staff. The staff, which was once just a shepherd's crook, now became an instrument of cosmic, creative power. The sea did not merely recede, it split apart. It was an impossible, anti-physical miracle. The waters divided, forming two immense vertical walls that stood like mirrors of God, reflecting the sky they could not hold. A dry bottom was revealed as a passage, a path that stretched like a scar on the face of the earth, a path no one had walked since the beginning of creation. The people walked through this water, and the wind that had driven the waves now dried the way. It was a journey through a hell that became a path to paradise. When the Israelites stepped onto the bottom, Pharaoh's chariots, driven by furious anger and blind pride, thundered after them. They saw the road, but did not understand its significance. The Egyptians, armed to the teeth, entered this corridor between the walls of water. The sea, which was a witness to their greatness, now became a witness to their catastrophe. The chariot wheels became mired in the wet, muddy bottom, and the proud warriors realized they were trapped. "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord fights for them against Egypt." This was their last terrible cry of realization. But it was too late. Moses stretched out his hand again, and the waves closed. It was not a quiet merging, but a majestic, thundering, final act of judgment. Thousands of chariots, riders, and warriors who considered themselves eternal were swallowed up. The silence that followed this thunder was solemn and sacred. It was the silence of completion, the silence of liberation. Then, when the Israelites reached the opposite shore, seeing the corpses of their enemies washed up on the sand, the cry of fear turned into a shout of joy. It was a triumph that could only be expressed through music. Miriam, Moses' sister, the prophetess, took her timbrel, not a professional instrument, but a simple, joyful tambourine. And beating it, she began to sing. All the women followed her, and this was the birth of liturgical freedom. "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." This was a hymn in which blood and hope, fear and triumph mingled. It was the first great psalm of a free people bearing witness. The Lord is a warrior, and his name is the deliverer. They were free, they were saved, but the most difficult path was just beginning. Chapter 6. The new path, the crucible of the desert, and the lesson of freedom. The sea was behind them, and the desert lay ahead. Boundless, yellow, merciless emptiness. This was neither a random landscape nor a punishment, but a sacred space, a path of purification that lasted 40 years. A people born of slavery had to learn to be free. The external chains were broken, but the internal chains, the chains of Egypt in the soul, were much stronger. They were free, but still thought like slaves, nostalgic for the onions and meat of Egypt, for the false security of servitude that offered them food in exchange for their soul. This was a time of great trial and great pedagogy. God walked before them in a cloud by day that protected them from the relentless sun, and in fire by night that warmed them and illuminated the way. This cloud and fire were not just guiding lights, but a constant, visible, inescapable presence of the covenant. They were like a huge, invisible eye, always watching, always leading, always waiting. Every breath of wind, every ray of sun, every sip of water, every piece of food in the desert became a lesson. When the people complained of hunger, manna fell from the sky, a mysterious sweet bread that appeared every morning but could not be hoarded for tomorrow. It was a lesson in daily dependence on God. It was the education of trust. When they longed for water, Moses struck the rock with his staff, and water flowed from it, a symbol of the inexhaustible source of life accompanying them in the wasteland. The desert was transformed into the greatest school in the world, where one could neither cheat nor deceive. The people who had just sung hymns were complaining again within a few weeks. They constantly murmured, longing to return to slavery, where at least a guaranteed ration existed. This Egyptian syndrome was the greatest enemy on the way to the Promised Land. Moses, their leader, who had just parted the sea, now had to fight not Pharaoh, but the unbelief of his own people. He was the mediator between the holy, demanding will of God and human weakness, a mediator who constantly stood on the brink of despair. And in the midst of this sandy void, this trial of flesh and spirit, a constant, persistent reminder echoed. It was engraved on every stone, embedded in every piece of manna, in every breath of wind, in every step. I am the Lord who brought you out. This phrase was the foundation of their new identity. They were not just a tribe, they were the redeemed people. This path was to conclude on Mount Sinai, where God not merely appeared, but made a covenant. The desert prepared them for this encounter. It was the place where the old, slavish consciousness was destroyed, and a new, free nation was to be born, ruled not by a human king, but by a divine, unwavering law. It was a journey from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, a journey that determined the fate of the world. And it all began with a single groan and a single bush that did not consume itself.